off my jacket. Here, I'll do this.
This is an interview with Shelly Parks in Washington State. I'm Dyan Wiley, and I'm a board member of SAGE Senior Cohousing Advocates. And this is actually part 2. I interviewed Shelly around some basics of marketing that new groups should be thinking about. And this second part is we wanted to drill down a little more into marketing senior focused projects. And so Shelly was very willing to do another shorter interview maybe. So Shelly, can you start us off? Just quickly mention your background again in case people are seeing this part 2 first. And then we can talk a little more about the topic.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Dyan. So my professional background for many years was leading sales and marketing teams in large continuing care retirement communities. So I was responsible for, and it was mainly in startups. So I was responsible of finding the buyers that these communities needed in order to get their financing to get built. So similar to co-housing. So, every day for 8 to 10 hours a day, I would work with people that were considering moving into independent living in retirement communities. So it was focused on people that needed to qualify to live independently. So a lot of similarities with co-housing, and it's fun for me to bring those many years of experience into the co-housing world.
Great. So as we were talking before, a lot of the work of marketing a co-housing project is true regardless of whether it's focused on creating senior co-housing or creating a multi-generational co-housing. Marketing is marketing, bringing members in. But then there's this layer of the messaging, the communication, the concerns that seniors have for moving into or considering a cooperative community like co-housing. So what SAGE advice and lessons learned can you share with people considering, getting a senior co-housing project started?
Yeah, so there's lots of things to talk about here. First of all, is the word senior, right? That term is so challenging for all of us. And I think, whether it's senior co-housing or senior retirement living, the goal is always to have people move in, on the younger age, not the older age, right? I mean, it's like you want people to be able to enjoy the lifestyle as long as they can. So that word senior is always problematic. I've heard groups use a lot of really great terms, and I still struggle with it. The proactive, adults, 55 plus, there's lots of different ways, but just being mindful of that term, I think, as we all know, it's a little bit of a challenge. But I was thinking about, I guess, let me just share with you the thoughts that come to my head, and they might be a little bit out of order, but I think that the best time to catch people is when they are making a major life change, and that typically often is when people are thinking about retiring. So what I find is that when people are thinking about retiring, they're also very open to thinking about what do I want my life to look like when I retire? So catching them at that moment can be really a great time, because oftentimes people are living in big houses. They don't need to live in those larger houses anymore. They're tired of their stuff. They want to downsize. There's lots of things that are in people's heads. So if you can, figure out how to get to that market, I think that's always really great. The other thing that I find really helpful is to talk with people. So I'm at the tail end of the baby boomers. I had sisters that were at the beginning of baby boomers. So I was, kind of living this baby boomer stage, which is the demographic that we're probably most looking for with senior co-housing. And talking, we're really the first generation that has dealt with aging parents like we have. I think of my parents didn't deal with aging parents because they didn't live as long and have all the resources available. And I think any of us that have intimately been involved with our aging parents, we have asked ourselves, how do we do this differently? And how do we want it to look for ourselves? And those conversations are great. I mean, I know that there are lots of formats to do this. I know Chuck Durrett has his study group training, and there's lots of ways to have these conversations, but to encourage them, I think gets people thinking about co-housing might be an option. Downsizing is another one, right? Talking with people, because I just find that such a huge topic for people. And downsizing is or co-housing is such a great way to talk about the downsizing. We tend to have, the shared environment, the collaboration that we do. There's lots of ways that ties in. The thing that I'm really realizing during this pandemic is how people are also realizing that they do not want to move into retirement living. You're hearing some real horror stories come out of people. Well, my husband says it well. He said, I wouldn't want to be a prisoner, because, having worked in those communities, I understand what comes from the risk side, the management side, and they're needing to mitigate their risk. And so they're needing to lock their places down. And that has been really hard on people that are, I think people really feel the loss of control. And so, this is a good time to be talking with people about the co-housing option, because people understand isolation. Many of us are isolated in our homes now, so we get it. We know that living in community would be really valuable. And many of us are saying, I don't want to live in an option that maybe my parents considered. And then just lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenge of people getting confused about, for instance, when I was working in the retirement living world, and as I was making the transition to co-housing, I would tell my colleagues about what I was doing, and they would always ask me, well, what's going to happen when someone needs care? How are people going to, who's going to care for them? And that was a really fascinating question to me, because I don't know what the percentage is, but it's actually a very small percentage of our older adults who need assisted living or skilled care. But if you're working in that world, you think everybody needs it. So, in reality, if we were to live in a senior co-housing community, yes, there will be people that may not be able to stay there long-term because of care needs. But the great thing is a community will be able to really talk through that. And there's all kinds of wonderful stories about, how communities do that. But it is, we know that we live longer and we live better if we're in community. So if your goal is to, not be isolated, mm-hmm. and live in community, co-housing is the way to go. You're not going to get that if you stay isolated in your home. So just some of my thoughts.
That's great. And for me, I've been here in Pioneer Valley Cohousing in Amherst, Massachusetts for 25 years. And our oldest residents, the only two that ever had to go anywhere else was they went to hospice. Mm-hmm. That was it. It was end of life, and they were here until then. Yeah. So not to say that that's how everywhere will happen, but nationally statistics show that most people do not need skilled nursing care. Right. Till maybe at the very end. And you have all these years when you can live much more active, much more engaged, socially engaged life. People can check on you. We have one woman who had a stroke and she got all kinds of help. She's doing great. Another one who, there's a golf cart that's parked outside her house. Mm-hmm. She gets in it and goes down to get her New York Times and go get her mail. People take her recycling out for her, so there's very little ways, and she's in her late 80s. And what I've encountered in talking about the project across the street, which we were hoping would be a senior focused project, is the stereotypes that people hold in their minds. Chuck Durrett always had a very funny thing that says, how old do you think a senior citizen is. And he said the answer was always 10 years older than that person. So if the person was 75, a senior was 85. You know, it was always somewhere out there. It's not me. And I don't want to live with old people sitting in rocking chairs. And the truth of it is, if you want to go look at senior co-housing websites where people are living, they've built it, they've moved in, they are active, they are having fun, they're doing things together, they're helping each other. It's very vibrant. And how does that translate for groups to kind of build that into their marketing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess if I wanted to just go back to my marketing days, we all think of ourselves as looking younger than we actually look. You know, just go to one of your high school reunions and you know. So I think just a simple thing is make sure that if you use any images, you know, you definitely want to trend to. We used to use wanted to use pictures of people that were at least 10 years younger than the people that were actually moving in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, just being mindful of what are the visuals you're putting out there, because, you know, and I think, you know, the language is really, you know, what are those things that people are wanting to talk about, and having those questions. You know, the one thing that I also think about is, and I always have a little bit of a hard time explaining this, I need to work through it, but you know, there is a big difference between paying someone to serve you versus living in an environment where you're serving others and people are serving you. And we are made to serve other people. We feel good when we have that opportunity to help someone. And I think that, you know, co-housing is just, you know, it's the perfect environment to really live a life with purpose, to be able to serve our neighbors and also accept help. And I think our culture, you know, we've gotten used to paying people to do things for us. So yeah, I keep thinking about how do we really message that, because that resonates with people, but I think that needs to be worked on. But I've been thinking through that, and you know, because it's easy to throw money at it, you know, having someone serve us. And I can tell you where this became clear to me was I was actually staying at Nevada City Co-housing. I was there with Katie McCammett, and there was a common meal, and there was a comment made about how much the common meal was per person. And I don't remember what the dollar was. It was less than $5. It was very inexpensive. And the week before, I had been at work sitting in a budget meeting where each department was sharing their budgets. And the dining department at this large continuing care retirement community was sharing their dining budget. And it was almost $20 for a dinner meal per person because of all the staff and the dining room and all that. And they were not great meals. And I remember that's when it hit me that financially co-housing makes so much sense. And that was, you know, that was independent living. It was very expensive to be able to put that. And I realized in that conversation that, you know, people, their monthly fees, that's what they were paying for. They were paying, you know, for the salary of the big marketing team. You know, they were paying for a lot. And that just seems, well, first of all, it's not sustainable, right? Because it's just not economically sustainable. But it also made me sad that that's where the money was going.
Right.
That didn't really answer your question, but
It absolutely did, and more.
Yeah.
You reminded me, you know, I facilitated a study group series, it's called Aging Successfully. And the image that I used for my flyer, you were talking about images, was I borrowed the one from Wolf Creek, and it's a woman with white hair, and she's sitting on a little motor scooter with her feet out, and some little great blurb about, you know, living the way you want to. And for me, that just synthesized the notion that, yeah, my hair is white, and I have a lot more living to do if my body holds up, and my body holds up better here. I have to walk up a hill. You know, we happen to be built on a hill. I have to go get my mail. My mail doesn't get delivered to my house. I walk, you know, a few houses down to pick up my mail. My car is parked in Congregate. So there's built-in exercise, if you will, as well as whatever I do. And I think the lifestyle options, what you're saying is to really make that distinction of how this is socially, culturally, financially much richer than
Yep.
the corporate model that this sits alongside of.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Shelley, thank you so much. And maybe we should make a series. I think you and I
This
could
is fun.
talk about all sorts of things that groups hopefully would benefit from. But that's it for today. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you, Dyan. I'm enjoying these conversations. They're great.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.